On June 16th, Ukraine showed the world a missile that carries itself into the sky on a balloon. The footage looked almost primitive, a fabric envelope drifting upward, a slim tube hanging beneath it. Easy to dismiss. A curiosity. But the engineers who built it weren't trying to impress anyone with spectacle. They were solving a problem that had quietly been bleeding Ukraine's drone fleet for 3 years. And the solution they found doesn't just answer that problem. It threatens to make some of the most expensive air defense systems on Earth look obsolete. Because the balloon isn't the story. The balloon is the delivery truck. What it's delivering is an idea, and that idea is what should be keeping Russian air defense planners awake at night. Start with what Ukraine had been doing well. For most of the war, its drones reached deep into Russian territory, refineries, airfields, logistics hubs. Then Russia adapted. GPS jammers, signal scramblers, layered electronic warfare. Russian EW systems began knocking Ukrainian drones out of the sky or simply nudging them off course until they fell harmlessly into a field. Here's the uncomfortable truth that drove everything that followed. A drone is only as good as the signal guiding it. Cut the signal, and you've cut the weapon. Ukraine could keep building drones, but it was building them into a wall. So Ukrainian engineers asked a different question. Not how do we protect the signal, but what if there were no signal to protect? The answer is a missile called DART, developed under the Innovative Technology Center program. And the genius of it isn't in what it adds, it's in what it removes. DART is small, just 1.84 meters long, 13 kilograms in weight, carrying a warhead between 3.5 and 10 kilograms. By the standards of strategic weapons, it's almost nothing. But watch how it works, because this is where the visible story splits from the real one. A stratospheric balloon, cheap, radar faint, easy to miss, lifts DART to an altitude no air defense system can reach. The missile drops. For a moment, it's guided, finding its line toward the target. Then, at roughly 6 kilometers, something counterintuitive happens. The navigation system shuts off completely. A solid fuel motor ignites, and DART commits to a fixed ballistic path, accelerating into a near-vertical dive. Special servo actuators hold it stable and online. Air defense crews have seconds to react, and nothing to react against. Think about what that means for a Russian EW operator. His entire job is to find a signal and break it. He scans his screen for the link between the drone and its controller. With DART, there is no link. The missile is deaf and blind by design, and that deafness is its armor. You cannot jam silence. This is the part worth sitting with. For years, the arms race in this war was about stronger signals versus stronger jammers. DART doesn't win that race. It refuses to run it. Stack the advantages, and a pattern emerges, what you might call triple invisibility. The balloon evades radar because it's small and flying where few systems look. The missile is nearly invisible to radar because its cross-section is tiny, and in its terminal dive, it's electronically invisible because it emits nothing at all. Hard to detect, hard to track, impossible to jam. Russia's air defense isn't a single shield. It's a chain of links, each handing off to the next. Detection passes to tracking, tracking passes to interception, interception passes to electronic warfare as a backstop. DART doesn't slip through one link. It breaks 3 of them at once. And when 3 links snap, the chain doesn't weaken. It collapses. But the military collapse is only half of it. The other half is arithmetic, and the arithmetic is where this gets dangerous. A single DART system, balloon included, costs roughly $6,000. The S-400 interceptor missile you'd fire to stop it costs hundreds of thousands. Read that ratio again, because it's the entire strategic argument compressed into 2 numbers. To defend, Russia spends $100 for every one Ukraine spends to attack. Launch 10 darts, and Russia burns millions trying to stop them. Launch 100, and Russia starts running out of interceptors entirely. Interceptors that took years and factories to build. And here's the trap inside the trap. Every dart Russia can't afford to stop is free to do its job. That job is infrastructure. The warhead carries graphite-based strike elements, and the choice of graphite is deliberate. Graphite doesn't blow things apart, it shorts them out. Dropped on transformer stations and power lines, it creates cascading short circuits, soft destruction that takes weeks to repair. Ukraine already does this with conventional means. DART promises the same effect, cheaper, and without risking a single pilot or expensive cruise missile. So now Russia faces a choice with no good answer. Spend a fortune intercepting $6,000 threats, or let the power grid take damage measured in weeks. Either way, Ukraine wins the exchange. Here's where the story expands again, because a single clever missile is a tactic, not a transformation. DART is built to operate inside a layered attack doctrine. Picture the sequence. First, balloons and decoy drones flood the sky, forcing Russia's air defense to light up and spend expensive missiles on false targets. Then DART slips through the radar gaps that opened up, going after the energy grid. Then conventional drones and missiles deliver the real blow against defenses that are now exhausted and out of position. Every layer clears the path for the next. And against every layer, Russia has to respond separately, each response burning resources it can't easily replace. This is the deeper logic. DART's purpose isn't standalone destruction, it's exhaustion. It forces Russia to spend and spend and spend until the defensive equation breaks under its own weight. And the supply side makes it worse for Moscow. DART is simple: cheap materials, standard components, a design built for mass production. Balloons cost hundreds of dollars and are single-use. Ukraine has already proven it can scale drone manufacturing to industrial levels, and the same lines can stamp out darts. Russia, meanwhile, would need years and billions to field the high-altitude radars and anti-balloon systems that could counter them. Attack is cheap and fast. Defense is expensive and slow. That gap doesn't close over time. It widens. DART didn't appear from nowhere on June 16th. It's the latest link in an ecosystem Ukraine has been assembling for 2 years, almost in plain sight. From early 2025, Ukraine released thousands of stratospheric balloons into Russian airspace. Some traveled as far as 4,000 kilometers, deep enough to reach the Urals. At first, they were pure decoys, soaking up radar attention and baiting Russia into wasting interceptors on empty targets. And Russia couldn't find a good answer. Scramble fighter jets to shoot down balloons, and you're spending millions on something worth almost nothing. Ignore them, and you've left the door open for a real strike. The balloons forced Russian planners into a dilemma with no clean exit. Then the missions multiplied. Balloons became reconnaissance platforms, then airborne relay stations for drone operations, then weapons carriers. The Hornet system lets a balloon ferry a drone 42 kilometers and release it from 8 kilometers up, so the drone spends its battery on the attack instead of the journey, multiplying its range. One company moved tethered balloon systems into mass production and earned NATO codification, making them an exportable standard product. At Eurosatori 2026, another firm unveiled Spectre-C, an EW-resistant decoy that mimics the radar signature of a real fighter jet, drawing full defensive responses at a fraction of the cost. The evolution line is clean: decoy to reconnaissance to drone carrier to missile. Each step widened the gap the previous step had opened. DART is simply the rocket-armed version of a platform Ukraine already mastered. Step back far enough and you realize none of this is new. It's ancient. The first military balloon flew in 1794 during the French Revolutionary Wars. At the Battle of Fleurus, an observation balloon mapped enemy positions. The first aerial intelligence operation in history. Balloons directed artillery in the American Civil War. Barrier balloons blocked aircraft in World War I. In World War II, Japan's Fugo balloon bombs crossed the Pacific to reach the American mainland, the first intercontinental weapon system. During the Cold War, America floated Project Genetrix spy balloons over the Soviet Union. In every era, the balloon found a role. And in every era, a newer technology retired it. Aircraft took reconnaissance, satellites took intelligence, missiles took the attack. What Ukraine has done is reverse the cycle. It took the oldest platform in military aviation and rebuilt it for the one environment modern systems struggle with most: a battlefield saturated with electronic warfare. And the world noticed because the great powers are circling the same airspace. This is the moment the story stops being about Ukraine. The United States, through its Defense Innovation Unit, has awarded contracts for stratospheric balloon platforms, Thunderhead systems reaching 30,000 meters for long-duration surveillance, signals intelligence, and communications. In August 2025, high-altitude balloons were tested at the Arctic Edge exercise in Alaska and used for maritime target detection during the Thundercloud exercise in Norway. Even Australia has begun its own high-altitude trials, but Washington still treats this as an intelligence tool, not a weapon. Ukraine's success with DART could change that calculation. China is more ambitious. Chinese strategists openly call near space a new domain of military competition, and they've spent over a decade investing in stratospheric airships, solar drones, and high-altitude balloons. The 2023 spy balloon crisis, a SIGINT-capable balloon drifting over sensitive U.S. facilities at 18 to 20 kilometers before an F-22 shot it down, was that program's first public test. U.S. intelligence says China has flown similar balloons over more than 40 countries. Russia doesn't want to be left behind either. Its Barrage 1 stratospheric platform first flew in February 2026, capable of lifting 100 kilograms to 20 kilometers, shifting altitude on wind currents via a pneumatic ballast system. It was rushed forward as a communications alternative in occupied Ukrainian territory after Starlink access was restricted. But Russia has a problem the others don't, and it's almost poetic. The prevailing winds over Ukraine blow west to east. A balloon launched from Russian soil doesn't drift toward Ukraine. It drifts deeper into Russia. The atmosphere itself refuses to cooperate. And critically, none of these powers has done what Ukraine has done: turned the balloon into an armed system in active combat against a real enemy. DART is the first true weapon of its kind. Everyone else is still taking notes. A clear-eyed analysis has to name what DART can't do, because the hype runs ahead of the hardware. DART is still in codification. It hasn't been combat-proven, and the jump from prototype to battlefield is always harder than it looks on paper. Ukraine has launched over 1,000 balloons since fall 2025, but it has never published how many reach their targets. The success rate is simply unknown. Then there's the wind. A balloon launches in 15 minutes, but stratospheric winds shift direction at different altitudes, and steering a balloon to a precise point is, at best, approximate. DARPA has spent years on this exact problem through its ALTA program and still hasn't fully cracked it. And the warhead is small. 13 kilograms cannot level a strategic facility. DART falls short against bunkers, hardened shelters, and protected command centers. It's an infrastructure weapon, not a general-purpose strike platform. Russia, of course, isn't standing still. The Fakel Design Bureau, maker of the S-300 and Tor-E, has built a $500 fire-and-forget interceptor drone called Yolka that hunts small UAVs autonomously. Another firm developed Barrier, a system that hangs nets from balloons to snare drones, a modern echo of World War II barrage balloons. Russia is bolting EW onto its own Shaheds, fitting jet engines, varying flight altitudes. Russia adapts fast. DART's edge may not last. And yet, every one of those countermeasures proves DART's real point. Yolka, Barrier, the new anti-balloon nets. Each is a resource Russia now has to fund, deploy, and maintain. DART's mission was never to destroy a single bunker. Its mission is to make defense unaffordable. Every counter Russia builds is evidence of the pressure DART creates, and every ruble spent on one front leaves a gap on another. Even the wind cuts Ukraine's way. Those west-to-east currents that drag Russian balloons backward, they blow straight along Ukraine's line of attack. What handicaps Moscow propels Kyiv? Ukraine's strategy was never to build one perfect superweapon. It's to weave a network of cheap edge case systems, drones, naval drones, balloons, missiles, that force the enemy to defend everywhere at once. DART is just the newest node. And as the network grows, Russia's defense costs don't rise in a line. They multiply. So return to that drifting balloon from June 16th and look at it again. It was never really a balloon, and DART was never really a missile. Together, they're a proof of concept for a new rule of warfare, that you can break a great power's defenses not by outspending them, but by inverting the cost equation entirely. Cheap platforms, smart munitions, and the patience to make the other side bankrupt themselves, defending against threats worth a few $1,000s each. This is why NATO is paying attention, and why Ukraine, having lifted its wartime export ban in April 2026, is opening weapons offices across Europe, beginning in Berlin and Copenhagen. Battle-proven weapons sell. Israel built an industry on it with Iron Dome and Spike. Turkey did it with the Bayraktar TB2. If DART performs in the field, it enters the market as the only EW-resistant stratospheric missile in existence, a monopoly, and monopolies command premiums. The old assumption was that air superiority belongs to whoever spends the most. The emerging reality is that it may belong to whoever spends the smartest. That's the paradigm shift, and a $6,000 weapon hanging from a $200 balloon is the first piece of evidence, which leaves the only question that really matters. If a war can be tilted by weapons cheap enough to lose by the thousand, then every expensive air defense doctrine on Earth is suddenly built on a faulty assumption. So has the balance already shifted, and are the great powers preparing for the last war, while Ukraine quietly writes the rules of the next one?